I sat in the mahogany-paneled office of Morrison & Associates, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the armrest of the leather chair. The air smelled of old books and furniture polish, that distinctive scent of old money and established law firms. Across from me sat my sister Victoria, perfectly composed in her Chanel suit, her manicured nails drumming impatiently on her designer handbag. She hadn't even looked at me since we arrived. It had been 3 weeks since our father passed away. Thomas Blackwood, real estate mogul, philanthropist, and the man who built an empire from nothing. The funeral had been a spectacle, hundreds of people, most of whom I'd never seen before, all claiming to have been close to him. Victoria had stood at the front, playing the grieving daughter perfectly, dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. I had stood in the back, genuinely heartbroken, remembering the father who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping me with algebra, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. But that was before Victoria returned from Europe 5 years ago with her new attitude and her new friends. Before she slowly poisoned our father's mind against me with carefully planted doubts and manufactured evidence of my supposed irresponsibility. Before I was gradually pushed out of family dinners, business meetings, and eventually, out of my father's life almost entirely. Mr. Morrison, our father's attorney for over 30 years, cleared his throat. He was a distinguished man in his late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen countless family dramas play out in this very room. Next to me sat my own attorney, James Chen, a sharp young lawyer I'd hired only 2 weeks ago when Victoria's lawyer had, accidentally, let slip that I might want legal representation at the reading. "Thank you both for coming," Mr. Morrison began, adjusting his reading glasses. "I know this is a difficult time. I want to start by saying that Thomas spoke of both of you often, and with great love." Victoria scoffed quietly, but I caught it. Mr. Morrison paused, his eyes flickering toward her, then continued. "Thomas Blackwood's estate is substantial. The primary assets include the Blackwood Holdings portfolio, which encompasses 17 commercial properties across the state, the family home on Elderberry Lane, various investment accounts totaling approximately $42 million, and several personal items of both monetary and sentimental value." My heart pounded. I wasn't here for the money. I'd made my own modest success as an architect, but the family home meant everything to me. It was where Mom had lived before she passed away when I was 12. Every room held a memory. I had assumed, hoped, that somehow Dad had remembered that. That despite Victoria's influence, he'd known how much that house meant to me. Mr. Morrison opened the will document, and an odd expression crossed his face, something between concern and anticipation. He began to read. "I, Thomas Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. First, to my daughter Victoria, I leave the sum of $500,000, to be distributed immediately upon my death." Victoria's face tightened, but she remained silent. $500,000 was nothing compared to the total estate. I felt a small flicker of hope. "To various charities and organizations, I bequeath a total of $2 million, to be distributed as detailed in Appendix A." Mr. Morrison paused, and I noticed his hand was shaking slightly as he turned the page. "To my daughter Sarah, I leave the entirety of Blackwood Holdings, all investment accounts, the family home on Elderberry Lane, and all remaining assets not otherwise specified, to be held in trust and managed by Morrison & Associates until such time as the conditions outlined in Appendix B are met or waived." The silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't breathe. Victoria's face had gone completely white, then red, then purple. Her carefully maintained composure shattered like glass. "What?" she hissed, leaning forward. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." Mr. Morrison's voice remained calm and professional. "There is no mistake, Miss Blackwood. The will was updated 6 months ago, reviewed by 3 separate attorneys, and your father was evaluated by 2 independent physicians who certified his mental competency at the time of signing. 6 months ago. That was right after the last time I'd seen Dad, a chance encounter at a coffee shop where he'd looked at me with such sadness and started to say something before Victoria appeared and whisked him away. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Thornton, placed a hand on her arm, but Victoria shook it off. "This is ridiculous," Victoria said, her voice rising. "Sarah abandoned the family years ago. She barely spoke to our father. I was the one who was there, who took care of everything, who managed his affairs when he got sick." "Victoria, please sit down," Miss Thornton urged quietly. But Victoria was beyond listening. She turned to face me directly for the first time, her eyes blazing with fury and something else. Was it fear? "You manipulated him," she spat. "You always were Daddy's little favorite, weren't you? Poor little Sarah, who lost her mommy. You used that your whole life, playing the victim, making everyone feel sorry for you." I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of her." "That's enough, Victoria," Mr. Morrison said firmly, his kind demeanor hardening into steel. "These accusations are inappropriate and unfounded." Victoria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Inappropriate. I'll tell you what's inappropriate. This entire situation is inappropriate. That house, that company, those assets, they should be mine. I earned them. I was there." She leaned across the table, her face inches from mine, and that's when I saw it. That smile. That cold, calculated smile that I'd seen so many times over the past 5 years. The smile that said she knew something I didn't. "Besides," she said softly, her voice dripping with venom, "none of this matters anyway. Because that house, that company, those millions, they were never really his to give away in the first place." My blood ran cold. What was she talking about? "That's quite enough," my attorney James said sharply, standing up. But Victoria ignored him. She straightened up, smoothing her suit, her composure sliding back into place like a mask. When she spoke again, her voice was saccharine sweet. "You see, Sarah, while you were off living your little life, playing with your building blocks and pretending you didn't care about the family business, I was actually paying attention. I was learning. And I learned something very interesting about our dear departed father's empire." "Miss Blackwood, I strongly advise you to stop talking," Ms. Thornton said urgently, tugging at Victoria's arm. But Victoria was on a roll now, drunk on her own perceived power. Blackwood Holdings was built on a foundation of lies and stolen property. 25 years ago, our father defrauded his business partner out of everything. The initial capital, the first properties, the whole damn thing, it all belonged to someone else. And I have proof. The room erupted. Mr. Morrison stood, his face grave. James was talking urgently, but I couldn't hear him over the roaring in my ears. This couldn't be true. My father was many things, but he wasn't a thief. He wasn't a fraud. Was he? "You're lying," I whispered, but even I could hear the doubt in my voice. Victoria's smile widened, triumphant. "Am I? Because I have documents, Sarah. Contracts, emails, recordings, all proving that Thomas Blackwood stole everything from Marcus Reed 25 years ago. And guess what? Marcus Reed's son, Daniel, is very interested in pursuing legal action. In fact, he's already filed preliminary motions to freeze the estate pending investigation." She leaned in close again, and this time her smile was pure malice. "So congratulations, little sister. You just inherited absolutely nothing. Because none of it was ever really ours. It was never yours. It was never his." That's when James stood up, and I noticed that his expression wasn't shocked or concerned. Instead, he looked almost satisfied, like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Actually, Miss Blackwood," he said calmly, reaching into his briefcase, "I think you'll find that's not quite accurate." The confidence in James's voice cut through the chaos like a knife through butter. Everyone froze, Victoria mid-gloat, Ms. Thornton mid-objection, Mr. Morrison mid-protest. Even I stopped breathing for a moment. James pulled out a leather folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table with a soft thud that somehow sounded thunderous in the suddenly silent room. Before we go any further, James said, his voice measured and professional, I think everyone should know that I'm not just Sarah's attorney for this will reading. I've been investigating Blackwood Holdings and its history for the past 8 months, hired by Thomas Blackwood himself. My head snapped toward him. What? Victoria's triumphant expression faltered. That's impossible. Is it? James opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents. Mr. Morrison, would you confirm that on March 15th of this year, Thomas Blackwood contacted your firm requesting a referral for an investigative attorney specializing in corporate fraud and estate protection? Mr. Morrison's face showed recognition. Yes, that's correct. Tom was concerned about some irregularities he'd discovered. He specifically requested someone outside his usual legal circle, someone who couldn't be influenced or compromised. And you recommended me, James continued, pulling out a document with Mr. Morrison's signature. Thomas Blackwood hired me with explicit instructions. Investigate his own company's founding, trace every transaction, every property acquisition, every deal from the very beginning. He wanted to know the truth about Marcus Reed. My mind was reeling. Dad had known? He'd known there might be something wrong and he'd been investigating himself? Victoria's face had gone pale, but she recovered quickly. Fine. So he hired you. That doesn't change anything. If there's proof that he defrauded Marcus Reed. There's no proof, James interrupted, because it never happened. He pulled out a thick document and slid it across the table to Mr. Morrison. This is a complete timeline of every transaction between Thomas Blackwood and Marcus Reed, supported by bank records, property deeds, signed contracts, and witness testimonies. Not only did Thomas not defraud Marcus Reed, he saved him from bankruptcy. The room went silent again. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. James continued, his voice gaining strength. In 1999, Marcus Reed and Thomas Blackwood were indeed business partners. They'd pooled their resources to buy their first commercial property. But Marcus had a gambling problem. A severe one. Within 6 months, he'd secretly mortgaged their joint property 3 times over to pay his debts. When Thomas discovered this, they were days away from losing everything. He pulled out another document, this one yellowed with age. This is the original partnership agreement, and this, he produced another paper, is a loan document showing that Thomas Blackwood took out a personal loan of $300,000 to pay off Marcus's gambling debts and save their property. Victoria shook her head. No, that's not. I have documents that say. You have forgeries, James said flatly. Very good ones, I'll admit. It took our handwriting analysts and forensic document examiners weeks to prove it, but every document you supposedly found proving fraud is fake. The contracts are backdated using incorrect paper stock and ink formulations. The emails were created using metadata manipulation. The recordings are AI-generated voice clones. Not a single piece of your evidence would hold up in court for 5 minutes. Ms. Thornton had gone absolutely rigid, her face professionally blank but her eyes calculating frantically. Victoria, however, was turning an alarming shade of red. That's impossible, she hissed. I found those documents in Dad's private safe. She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd just admitted. You broke into your father's safe, James said, not a question but a statement. When was this, Miss Blackwood? Before or after you started siphoning money from his accounts? The color drained from Victoria's face completely. Mr. Morrison leaned forward. What are you talking about? James pulled out yet another set of documents. Over the past 3 years, someone with access to Thomas Blackwood's accounts and passwords has been systematically transferring money out of his investment accounts and into a series of shell companies. Small amounts at first, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, but growing bolder over time. The total sum stolen is approximately $2.3 million. That's absurd, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its conviction. I had power of attorney. I was managing his affairs because he was sick. Those were legitimate business expenses. Then you won't mind explaining what Emerald Consulting LLC is, James said, sliding a document toward her. Or Pacific Ridge Investments. Or my personal favorite, Thornton Advisory Services. Ms. Thornton stood abruptly. I think this meeting is over. Victoria, don't say another word. But James wasn't done. Those companies are owned by you, Miss Blackwood, and by you, Ms. Thornton. All registered in Delaware within the past 3 years. All receiving regular transfers from Thomas Blackwood's accounts. Transfers that were made using Victoria's power of attorney. A power of attorney that, by the way, was obtained under false pretenses. He produced another document. This is a medical evaluation from Dr. Patricia Chen, Thomas Blackwood's primary physician. It clearly states that at the time Victoria claimed her father was mentally incompetent and needed her to manage his affairs, he was in fact in perfect mental health. The evaluation she submitted to obtain power of attorney was signed by a Dr. Robert Harrison, a doctor who, interestingly enough, lost his medical license 2 years ago for insurance fraud. The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process everything I was hearing. Victoria had been stealing from Dad. She'd forged documents. She'd lied about his mental state. And somehow, she'd created an elaborate fraud to make it look like Dad was the criminal, not her. Why? I whispered, my voice breaking. Victoria, why would you do this? For the first time, Victoria's mask completely crumbled. Her face contorted with rage and something that looked almost like pain. Because he chose you, she screamed. He always chose you. Poor little Sarah who lost her mommy. Sweet Sarah who was so talented, so smart, so special. Do you know what it's like to be invisible in your own home? To watch your father dote on your younger sister while barely remembering you exist. Tears were streaming down her face now, her carefully applied makeup running in black streaks. I worked so hard. I got perfect grades. I learned the business inside and out. I did everything right. But it was never enough. Because you existed, and you were his favorite. Even after Mom died, especially after Mom died, you got all his attention, all his love, all his time. Victoria, I started, but she cut me off. No. You don't get to speak. You don't get to act like you understand. When I came back from Europe, I saw my chance. I could finally be the important one, the one he relied on. But even then, even when I was managing everything, when I was the one keeping him company, when I was the one actually there, he still asked about you. Still worried about you. Still loved you more. She wiped her face roughly with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup further. So yes, I took money. Money that should have been mine anyway. And yes, I created those documents about Marcus Reed. I thought if I could prove that everything Dad built was stolen, then it wouldn't matter who he left it to. The estate would be tied up in legal battles for years, and by the time it was all sorted out, you'd give up and go away, and I'd be the one left standing. And what about Daniel Reed? James asked quietly. Marcus Reed's son, who you claimed was pursuing legal action. Victoria laughed bitterly. There is no legal action. Daniel Reed died 5 years ago. I hired an actor to call Mr. Morrison's office and make threats. I thought it would be enough to scare Sarah into walking away from the inheritance. Mr. Morrison looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 20 minutes. Victoria, do you understand what you've done? This isn't just unethical. It's criminal. We're talking about fraud, theft, forgery, embezzlement. I know what I've done. Victoria shouted. And I'd do it again. Because none of you understand what it's like to be second best your entire life. Ms. Thornton grabbed Victoria's arm firmly. Victoria, as your attorney, I am strongly advising you to stop talking immediately. We're leaving. Now. But James held up a hand. Actually, you're not. I've already contacted the district attorney's office. There are 2 detectives waiting outside this building. The evidence of embezzlement and fraud is overwhelming. They'll be taking statements from everyone present, and Miss Blackwood will likely be arrested within the hour." Victoria's legs seemed to give out, and she collapsed back into her chair. Ms. Thornton was already on her phone, presumably calling for backup legal counsel. I sat there, numb, watching my sister fall apart. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and the theft and the cruelty, part of me still saw the big sister who used to braid my hair. The teenager who taught me to apply makeup. The young woman who held me while I cried after Mom died. "James," I said quietly, "is all of this really necessary? Couldn't we?" "Sarah, no," James said firmly but gently. "Your father anticipated this exact reaction from you. That's why he hired me, and that's why he was very specific in his instructions. He wrote you a letter." He pulled out an envelope from the folder, my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting on the front. My hands shook as I took it. "He wanted you to read it now, in this moment, before you make any decisions about Victoria's fate." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and began to read. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this letter, then everything I feared has come to pass. Victoria has revealed herself, and you're sitting in Mr. Morrison's office feeling confused, hurt, and probably inclined to forgive your sister despite everything she's done. I know you, sweetheart. I know your kind heart. It's one of the things I loved most about you, even when it frustrated me. Let me start by saying that everything James has told you is true. I discovered Victoria's theft about a year ago, quite by accident, when I was reviewing some investment statements and noticed inconsistencies. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there must be an explanation, that my daughter, my firstborn, couldn't be stealing from me. But the evidence kept mounting. The more I investigated, the worse it got. The fake documents about Marcus Reed, yes, I found those too. She'd planted them in my safe, thinking I'd never discover them, that they'd be found after my death and would destroy the estate I'd built for you. You're probably wondering why I didn't confront her immediately, why I let it continue. The truth is, I wanted to understand why. I wanted to give her a chance to come to me, to confess, to show some remorse. I kept waiting for the daughter I remembered to resurface, the little girl who used to climb into my lap and fall asleep during Saturday morning cartoons. She never did. Instead, I watched her poison you with carefully crafted lies. I watched her manipulate situations to make you look bad. I saw her intercept your calls and emails, saw her tell you I was too busy to see you when I'd been asking about you all day. She was systematic about it, methodical. It was like watching a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The hardest moment was when I finally understood the depth of her resentment toward you. I overheard her on the phone one night, talking to that lawyer of hers, Patricia Thornton. She said, "Once Sarah's out of the picture permanently, everything will be mine." The way she said, "permanently, Sarah," it terrified me. I don't know if she meant legally or something worse, and I couldn't take the chance. That's when I contacted Mr. Morrison and asked him to find me someone like James. Someone smart, thorough, and outside our usual circle. Someone Victoria couldn't compromise. Now, here's what you need to understand, sweetheart. Victoria is sick. Not physically, but mentally and emotionally. She's been consumed by jealousy and bitterness for so long that I don't think there's anything left of the girl she used to be. The therapist I consulted, without naming names of course, suggested she has narcissistic personality disorder combined with severe unresolved childhood trauma. I know what you're thinking right now. But Dad, I should have noticed. I should have been nicer to her. Maybe if I'd reached out more, included her more, loved her better. Stop. Right now, stop those thoughts. Victoria's problems started long before your mother died, before you were even born. When Victoria was a baby, she was difficult, colicky, demanding, never satisfied. Your mother and I were young and overwhelmed. We probably didn't handle it as well as we should have. And when you came along 4 years later, such an easy, happy baby. I'm ashamed to say it, but we were relieved. It was easier to focus on you. That doesn't excuse our failures as parents, but it also doesn't excuse Victoria's choices as an adult. She had every opportunity for therapy, for help, for honest conversation. Instead, she chose manipulation, theft, and cruelty. Those were her choices, Sarah. Not yours. Now, you're probably tempted to be merciful. To tell James to drop the charges, to give Victoria another chance, to believe that with enough love and support, she can change. I'm asking you, begging you, not to do that. I've set aside $500,000 for Victoria. That's more than most people see in a lifetime. It's enough for her to start over, to get help if she chooses, to build a life for herself. But the rest of the estate is yours because you earned it, not through manipulation or theft, but through being a person of integrity and kindness. Victoria needs consequences, sweetheart. Real ones. The kind that might actually force her to confront what she's become and make a choice to change. If you protect her from those consequences now, you'll only enable her to hurt more people in the future, and the next victim might not be as lucky as you. There's something else you should know. 6 months ago, I went to that coffee shop where we ran into each other. That wasn't an accident. I'd been trying to arrange a private meeting for weeks, but Victoria had changed my phone settings to route your calls to her phone instead. She'd been responding to your texts pretending to be me, telling you I was too busy or too tired to talk. When I saw you that day, I wanted to tell you everything. I wanted to explain, to apologize, to pull you into my arms the way I used to when you were little and had a bad day. But Victoria appeared so quickly. She'd been monitoring my location through my phone, and I realized that any conversation we had would get back to her immediately. That's when I knew I had to wait. I had to let James finish his investigation, had to get all the evidence documented properly. I had to make sure that after I was gone, the truth would come out and you would be protected. I'm sorry I let it get this far. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to confront Victoria directly. I told myself I was being strategic, gathering evidence, protecting you, and all of that was true. But I was also afraid. Afraid of losing another daughter. Afraid of admitting that I'd failed as a father. Afraid of facing the extent of the damage that had been done. But here's what I want you to remember. Sarah, you are not responsible for fixing Victoria. You are not responsible for her happiness or her future or her redemption. Those are her responsibilities, and hers alone. Your responsibility, the only thing I ask of you, is to live a good life. Use the resources I'm leaving you to do good things. Build beautiful buildings that make people's lives better. Support the causes you care about. Fall in love, have adventures, make mistakes, learn from them. Be the person I always knew you could be. And if someday, years from now, Victoria gets real help and becomes someone capable of honest, healthy relationships, then maybe, you can have a relationship with her again. But that's future Sarah's decision to make, not present Sarah's burden to carry. I love you, sweetheart. I always have. I always will. I'm sorry I won't be there to see the amazing life I know you're going to build, but I'll be watching over you somehow, somewhere. Make me proud. All my love, Dad. P.S. The house on Elderberry Lane is yours, but before you go there, look under the loose floorboard in your old closet. Your mother left something there for you years ago, when she knew she was dying. I've kept it safe all this time, waiting for the right moment. I think that moment is now. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. My hands were shaking so badly that Mr. Morrison gently took the letter from me before I could drop it. I looked up at Victoria, still sitting in her chair, her face a mask of shock and despair. For a moment, just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the sister I used to know. The one who was hurting, who had been hurting for so long that she'd forgotten how to be anything else. I'm sorry, I said softly. I'm sorry that you felt invisible. I'm sorry that we failed you. I'm sorry for all the ways our family was broken. Victoria's face crumpled, and for a second I thought she might cry, might show some real emotion, some real remorse. But then her expression hardened again, that familiar mask sliding back into place. Save your pity, she said coldly. I don't need it, and I don't want it. That's your choice, I said, and I was surprised by the steadiness in my voice. But I'm not going to ask James to drop the charges. Dad was right. You need real consequences, and I need to respect his wishes. Ms. Thornton was already packing up her briefcase. Victoria, we need to go now. We'll handle this, but you need to come with me immediately. As Victoria stood to leave, she paused at the door and looked back at me one last time. You always were his favorite, she said quietly, and for the first time, she didn't sound angry, just incredibly, devastatingly sad. I hope it was worth it. Then she was gone, Ms. Thornton ushering her out quickly. Through the window, I could see two detectives step forward to speak with them. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat gently. Sarah, I know this has been overwhelming. If you need time to process. What happens now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Now, James said, sitting down beside me, we make sure the estate is properly transferred to you. The freeze Victoria tried to create with her fake claims about Marcus Reed will be lifted within days. The investigation into her embezzlement will take time, but that's separate from the estate proceedings. And the money she stole? Most of it is still in those shell companies. We can recover it, though it will take some legal maneuvering. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything. Then I remembered something from Dad's letter. Mr. Morrison, you said Dad spoke of both of us with love. Was that true, or were you just being polite? The old lawyer's eyes softened. It was true. Even after he discovered Victoria's theft, he still spoke of her with sadness and hope. He never stopped loving her, Sarah. He just recognized that love isn't always enough to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. But for you, he continued, pulling out another envelope, his love was uncomplicated and absolute. He left me this, with instructions to give it to you after you'd read his letter. I took the envelope and found a key inside, along with a note in Dad's handwriting. For the house that holds all our memories. Make new ones, sweetheart. 3 weeks later, I stood in my childhood bedroom, the afternoon sun streaming through the window just like it used to. The house had been cleaned and maintained perfectly. Dad had made sure of that. Everything was exactly as I remembered, frozen in time like a museum of my childhood. I opened the closet and knelt down, running my fingers along the floorboards until I found the loose one. My heart was pounding as I lifted it carefully. Underneath, wrapped in faded purple fabric, was a small wooden box. Inside the box, I found letters, dozens of them, all in my mother's handwriting. Letters addressed to me, dated for different ages. For Sarah at 13, for Sarah's first heartbreak, for Sarah's wedding day, for when Sarah becomes a mother. Each envelope carefully sealed, waiting for moments that would come over the years. And underneath all the letters was a photograph I'd never seen before. Mom was holding me as a newborn, and she was looking at the camera with such pure joy that it made my breath catch. On the back, in her handwriting, my dearest Sarah, you were wanted, you were loved, and you were always, always enough. Never forget that. Love, Mom. I sat on the floor of my old closet, clutching the photograph and the box of letters, and I cried. I cried for my father, gone too soon. I cried for my mother, who I barely remembered but who had loved me enough to write letters for my future. I cried for Victoria, trapped in her own pain and anger. And I cried for myself, for the family I'd lost and the new life I was somehow supposed to build from the ashes. But underneath the grief, there was something else growing, something that felt like hope. Dad had given me more than just an inheritance of property and money. He'd given me the truth, however painful it was. He'd given me permission to let go of guilt that was never mine to carry. He'd given me his faith that I could use these resources to build something good. And Mom, all those years ago, had given me the gift of her words, her wisdom, her love stretching across time to reach me when I needed it most. I opened the envelope marked, "For when Sarah needs courage," and read, "My darling girl. If you're reading this, then life has thrown you something difficult. I don't know what it is, I won't be there to see it, but I know you. I know you're strong enough to handle it. You came from love, You are made of love, and love is the strongest force in the universe. Whatever you're facing, remember, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep going, keep choosing kindness and courage, keep believing in yourself the way I believe in you. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you will always be enough. Love forever and always, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, then carefully placed it back in the box with the others. I would read them all eventually, at the right moments, when I needed her voice in my life. For now, this one was enough. I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and looked around the room that held so many memories. The estate lawyers had told me I could sell the house if I wanted, or rent it out, or keep it. But standing there, I knew what I wanted to do. This house would become something new. Not a museum to the past, but a living space that honored the past while creating new futures. I'd already started looking into programs that provided housing for young people aging out of foster care, kids who needed a safe place to land while they figured out their lives. Kids who, like me in my own way, were trying to build something good from difficult circumstances. The Blackwood house would become a home again, filled with life and laughter and second chances. Dad would approve of that, I thought. Mom would too. My phone buzzed with a message from James. Court date set for Victoria's preliminary hearing. DA's office says they have everything they need. How are you holding up? I typed back. I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. Thank you for everything. His response came quickly. Your dad was a good man. He wanted to make sure you knew the truth and had the tools to move forward. I'm glad I could help with that. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, where we'd had barbecues on summer evenings, where Mom had planted a garden that still bloomed every spring thanks to the gardener Dad had kept on staff all these years. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello, Sarah. It's Victoria. I froze. How did you get this number? I memorized it. Years ago. She paused, and I could hear her breathing. I'm calling from the detention center. They're going to arraign me tomorrow, and my lawyer says I'm probably going to prison. 3 to 5 years, maybe more depending on what they can prove. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I'm not calling to apologize, she continued, her voice strangely flat. I'm not going to pretend I'm suddenly sorry for everything I did. But I wanted you to know. I read Dad's letter. The one he left for me. Mr. Morrison brought it today. I didn't know he left you a letter. Yeah. It was a lot like yours, probably. Explaining why he did what he did. Telling me he loved me anyway. Hoping I'd get help. She laughed, but it sounded hollow.